We started about 7 years ago talking about redeveloping Vajrasana, and none of us, I couldn't imagine having something as wonderful, as beautiful, as perfect as this. Seeing it on paper, seeing it as a building site, even seeing photos and videos of it really doesn't do it justice. Somehow being in the spaces, seeing people move and live and breathe in those spaces, it's tremendous.
Vajrasana was getting very old and tired. We couldn't sort of renovate or repair or refurbish what was here. We needed to start again. And Mahananda, who was a very, very much loved and very significant and colourful character in the LBC, he very suddenly and unexpectedly died, and it was a deep loss to our Sangha. But what he left us was a legacy, and the legacy was substantial and kick-started all the fundraising for this particular project. So just where this piece of machinery is on the left, that's where the communal block will start to be built, and panning around to where the cranes are, that'll be the accommodation block. There was a committee of 5 of us got together, 5 people from the LBC Council, and we became the poetically entitled Vajrasana Subcommittee. So between us we worked out the brief, and we wrote a very poetic brief, a very pragmatic brief, and that was part of the package that we sent out to the architects that we were thinking of commissioning.
It's very rare in architectural briefs for people to use a subjective word like beauty or beautiful, and I like the fact that the brief was all written around the idea of creating a series of beautiful spaces, and I just thought that was, although that could be subjective, I just liked the idea that that was an aspiration, that this project was about beauty.
Because of my architectural background, I became someone that sort of was very involved in that process. So for me it was just an incredible opportunity to bring together my Dharma practice with a profession that I had loved and poured myself into. And I've always been very struck by Bante's religion of art, and I've always wanted to explore that whole area about how do you give form to Buddhist practice within architecture. And this was the golden opportunity to explore not only how could we house the activities we need in a retreat centre, but how we could express our values in built form. A big challenge, an incredibly big challenge, because it'd never been done before. It was, not in the UK anyway. We'd never commissioned anything like that before. The architects had never designed anything like that before. We just had to sit down with the architects, lots of drawing, and just say, let's try and work this out together. I mean, we couldn't have got better architects, to tell the truth, because they were incredibly generous with their time, highly creative, and really relishing the opportunity to do something new, to do something fresh. And they knew when to be receptive and listen to us, and when to really start to steer us or to push us into areas that maybe we hadn't considered before. We were asked a lot of questions about why we practice the way we do, what its significance is, theological questions, if you like. And that meant we had to dig really deeply into why do we do things the way we do them, and is that the best way of doing them? And out of that, I think, started to shape a way that we wanted to practice on this particular site, within this particular retreat centre. So they really helped hone our spiritual imagination, very definitely.
On retreats, there's a lot of movement. People move regularly from the dining facilities to the shrine room and back again. Just practical things like people to be able to walk from one place to another undercover. And there's a lot of thought that went into cups of tea and food, and as well as shoes and whether shoes needed to be on or off. But it was also that on a more serious level, there was a desire for there to be a ceremonial connection between the places, and for there to be a ceremonial approach to the shrine room, that you would feel that you were moving from the communal areas and into the sacred place.
We wanted the three jewels to somehow be expressed and be given form. And it really suits, it suits any practicing Buddhist, doesn't it? The three jewels are what's at the heart of Buddhist practice. But also for us being Triratna, the three jewelled order, So there was a lot of level of symbolism. And then quite early on we hit on this notion of the axis of devotion, it became known as. So the series of spaces moving from a very colourful, interactive place where you gathered, you ate together, you hung out, and that was the Sangha courtyard, through a quietening process into a Dharma courtyard where the stupa is, which is behind me, which was more a place of reflection but also contemplation on impermanence, on the truth of change, and then into the heart of Buddhist practice, which is the Buddha himself, his enlightened state.
One of the most important things about the creation of this place, it's not merely a set of buildings and images and so forth. It's been an interweaving of the energies of a great many people who've worked together cooperatively to create this place. But it doesn't stop here. The retreat centre is not finished. In a sense, you could say it never will be. I'm sure many people have had this experience of a shrine room taking on more and more of a mood, an atmosphere, which is something more than the forms that are apparent. As more and more people pour their devotion into it, as more and more people align their skillful intention with it, it changes, it enriches. So the process of creating Vajrasana is going to be going on for years and years and years. And every one of us now is going to be playing a very, very important part in that. Because
we thought long and hard about what the shrine room should be. Some of the guiding principles were that the setting of the shrine room itself would be in a woodland that would grow up and develop, a natural woodland. The idea of being under a tree is obviously symbolic in Buddhism to the Buddha gaining enlightenment. The way that the space has been designed with the perforated walls up at the upper level is that you're down at the lower level, you're meditating, you're practicing. The Buddha, the Rupa, is the focus of your attention and your worship. But the light, you would sense a cloud passing in front of the sun. You would sense the light changing from morning to noon to evening.
The temple precinct, which is the Akshobhya courtyard, the stupa courtyard and the shrine room, is all made of brick. The rest of it, the accommodation, the communal areas around the Sangha courtyard, that's clad in vertical timber cladding which has been charred and oiled. Using the dark brick took a while to arrive at too, because for a long time we looked at very light coloured brick, and it felt like that actually what that would do, it wouldn't allow the Buddha to be the shining light in the space. Using a darker brick, using in a way a more sombre colour, really would allow the niche where the Buddha figure is housed in and the Rupa itself to be the very illumined figure in the room. Big Ellen.
There's been something that's happened on this project that's been quite literally magical in terms of how people have worked together, pulled together, gone the extra mile, done more than they really needed to, crossed over disciplines. It's been really very, very unusual. And I think that's to do with the project and that's to do with the client. And the LBC as a client have been a client like I've not had the privilege of working with many times before. Of course there have been problems, there always are. Building projects are complex and difficult and fraught with all sorts of anxieties. But there was always an attitude that that might be a problem, but we'll find a way of solving it. Yanavacha has just said today that this is a step forward for Western Buddhism in the world. And although he never quite articulated those words to me at the beginning, I had that sense of that responsibility, that this was something that was going to be scrutinised, that was going to be important in the future, that was going to set up something. It had a dynamic and an importance that was beyond any of us.
Can't quite find the words. I just feel really, really inspired and very, very grateful, particularly hearing about the people that have contributed to this and people that have made it come into being, like Yarn of Archer there. It's just been very, very inspiring to come here and be part of this weekend and just keep on rededicating the space, actually.
I'd underestimated how significant it is to have an original piece of Buddhist architecture in Britain, for one thing. Mostly as Buddhists in the West, we've been used to other buildings repurposed, so I hadn't even noticed, but mostly when we've gone on retreat, it's in farm buildings or an old school or any old shed, basically. But now we've got a real, extremely beautiful, quite profoundly endowed Buddhist retreat centre in Suffolk. It's very exciting.
It's difficult to know what effect this centre will have on the Sangha. Everything about the architecture, as you can see, speaks of our values. It speaks of, well, the three jewels. Everywhere you look, there's beauty. And when you're on retreat in an environment that is like this, I think it's so much easier to practice, it's so much easier to feel inspired, it's so much easier to go deeper. I also think it's going to be a stretch. I think the retreat centre speaks of us being confident as Western practitioners of Buddhism, confident as a movement, and I think we're going to have to sort of rise to that. It's almost like the retreat centre's demanding something of us. I can feel that.